So for this very, very brief video, which is part three for this week, I want to talk about one of the major paradigms called positivism and often called post-positivism. And this is something that emerged from natural sciences in the 19th century, and it's really the cornerstone or the root of Western science methods, especially across natural sciences, but also in the social sciences. When we use quantitative or standardized methods, we're often drawing from a positivistic or post-positivistic viewpoint. And the assumption is that the goal of science is to develop the most objective methods possible to get to the closest approximation of reality. That's your testing. That's your doing surveys and then doing quantitative analyses, understanding that you might have some error in your methods or in your analysis, but that you're really getting to an approximate of what is the truth. So here we've got a grid or a table of assumptions and parts of how we look at positivistic theory, okay? So the basic assumption is that the social world is made of observable facts, that we can actually observe what is happening and have people talk about or report on what is happening in their world and then actually see them as fact. In positivistic paradigms, the reality is seen as something that exists and that it can be observed and found, and that there is one reality and we're trying to measure it or get to it or observe it. But with post-positivism, we realize that there might be error because we're humans, right? We have that 0.05 alpha. With give or take, we know that something significantly impacts another thing, but there is always error, right? Sources of evidence are facts revealed through the scientific process, and they're seen as context free. Again, we talked about this, the idea that you're controlling for external factors that might actually cloud your ability to see a causal or a correlation relationship in the factors that you're looking at in your research. The methods are structured and standardized data collection methods such as surveys, clinical trials, scales, equipment, things like that. And the research intention is to describe, explain, verify something that you're asking, something that you go in thinking should be the truth, something that you should think should not be falsified, something that you predict, and find causal relationships about the world. Further, in positivistic paradigms, the role of the subject or the participant is very passive. They're there to answer structured questions. Okay, and they're not necessarily a part of the development of those questions or have a say in. There's no go-between between the researcher and the subject. And the role of the researcher is to be very objective and disconnected so that they do not bring themselves or bias the results that they find in their positivist paradigmed research. The impact of the study on participants is neutral. In positivistic research, because the subject is seen to be most likely passive, there are very few times or aspects where quantitative research will benefit or negatively challenge the participant. Okay. So that's so here are some examples of research questions from a positivistic paradigm, and they're based on literature that I read that's very recent. So one question might be, what is the prevalence, or that's the number, the amount, the things that are existing of tobacco product use in adolescents from California? So we see that's a very quantitative question. They're not asking why people use tobacco. They're just saying how many currently in a population at this time use tobacco products. What is the estimated association between the U.S. Food and Drug Administration's 2009 ban on flavored cigarettes and adolescents' tobacco use? So they're looking for an association. And that, in this study, was done through quantitative methods to find the association of factors. And as you learned in your research courses, association is very different than causal inference, but it's still a quantitative measure. And finally, what are the outcomes of a randomized controlled trial of a community intervention to prevent adolescent tobacco use? So, a randomized controlled trial often will be manipulating one specific variable, which would be the intervention, and controlling for other variables. So, you're not bringing in any context, you're just saying, is this intervention good or bad for adolescent tobacco use in terms of cessation? And can we say that because it was randomized, that people were randomized into these trials and that we controlled for external variables, can we say quantitatively within a little bit of error, was the intervention beneficial or not? So that's pretty much from a positivistic or post-positivistic paradigm. So think about the video I asked you to watch in terms of cracking the codes. What would a positivistic researcher or somebody from that paradigm ask in terms of the video? One example that I came up with is pertaining to the video. A researcher might ask African American women to fill out a survey to see what factors cause or predict experiences of discrimination, especially when they're out in a public space like in shopping. So that would be positivist, that there would be this idea of what is going on and asking people to fill out a very controlled survey and being able to conduct analyses that allow you to control for factors that you're not looking for. Okay, so in our next video, we're going to talk about the two other paradigms that are mostly associated with qualitative research, and those are the interpretivist and the transformative paradigms.